Hello everybody and welcome back to Amber's Adventures. Today I'm going to talk about Gyeongbokgung Palace and the museums that are right next to it. So what is Gyeongbokgung Palace? Gyeongbokgung is the main royal palace in Seoul. It was built in 1395 and it's one of 5 grand palaces built by the Joseon dynasty, which is the dynasty that you hear and see most of the time in the Korean dramas. And in Seoul, it's one of 5 palaces, the first being Gyeongbokgung, the second Gyeongbokgung, third Gyeonghwagung, the fourth Dokseonggung, and the last one, the fifth, is Gyeongbokgung. Now, I apologize if I said them wrong. It's been a while since I've spoken Korean, but I try my best. I will mention and have other videos on the other palaces that I visited, so feel free to wait and check out those at a future date. So much of Gyeongbokgung Palace was destroyed during the Imjin War. It was then restored, and then in the 20th century, during the early 20th century, during the Japanese occupation in the 1940s, it was once again destroyed, and then now it's being rebuilt, and they're moving buildings in from areas that they can no longer be at, or as I said, they're rebuilding to help reestablish and show off the palace once more. Next door to it, or right next to the Gyeongbokgung Palace, is the outer wall. There's a neighborhood called Bokcheon Hanok Village, which is right next door. And I'll talk about Bokcheon at another time, but it's really close. And as I mentioned before in the hanboks, I've been to Gyeongbokgung before wearing a hanbok. So you generally enter Gyeongbokgung through the main gate. It's called Gwanghwamun Gate. And here's a courtyard where you'll often pay for your ticket. The hours are 9 to 5 in the winter and 9 to 6 in the summer. Make sure to check before going, just to make sure that the times haven't changed. And it is often closed on Tuesdays. There are some dates where it's open or free, but most of the time it's 3,000 won per person, which is roughly $3. However, and I'm going to talk about hanbok once more, if you're wearing a hanbok, you will have a free entry. And this is true for almost all the palaces. So renting that hanbok is not a bad idea, especially if you plan to visit more than one palace in a day and you want to get pictures at the palace. If you're there at the main gate between 10 or 3 p.m., you'll have a chance to see the changing of guard ceremony that they put on in the traditional style. That would have been typical during the Joseon dynasty. They offer some night tours, typically during late spring, during the summer, and then during the early fall. I would check the dates just to see if they're happening, just to make sure, because often the times or the dates are changed. For the nighttime tour, you can't just show up. You need to make sure to book it in advance. There are guided tours often and offered in several different languages. For English, for example, the tours are at 1 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. Sometimes they'll offer a surgun tasting symphony. This is a ceremony where you get to try traditional royal food and see traditional performances. Again, this is something where you'll have to buy the ticket in advance, so you have to be prepared and know about it ahead of time. You can't just show up and hope that it's available. Sometimes during the summer, they will offer traditional tea ceremonies at Gyeongbokgung Hall. I would check to see if they're having it online. They might have the information about it, or if you just show up and know about it ahead of time, or show up and have it happening. And the dates range year to year, so I would check ahead of time if you're interested in seeing when that is. So typically when you enter through the main gate, you enter through what's called the Gyeongbokgung Gate, which is the gate where they'll take your ticket and punch it. And doing this, you enter into the outer court, or the Ojeon, sorry. And you'll be enter into the area. That's where they'll have their information desk. If you need help or you want a map, that's a great place to get the maps. The palace is really big, as you can see on this map here. So it's a really good idea if you are looking for a specific building or you want to get a picture of a specific area to get a map so you make sure you can get there. And I would check what construction's going on because, as I said, as they're rebuilding, they're updating, they're maintaining, it's good to check what areas are closed and what areas are open. Once you go through the first gate and you have your ticket taken care of, you'll cross over a bridge and enter under the Gyeongbokgung Gate into the into a courtyard where you can see the throne. The little building where the throne is held. In this courtyard, you'll often see stones of where your rank is, so what rank you are will depend on what area you line up in. The higher up your rank, the more likely you are to be inside. And so this is a really great place if you want to take pictures of the throne room, as you can see here. And as you can see, it's very detailed. The throne was designed like the idea that the emperor, or the king was sort of the son. And so that's why it's so important that he has it. And as is typical with most Asian royal imagery or symbols, yeah, that's the word I want. You'll typically see the dragon, as you can see either on the back of the throne or on the roof. And these are very these are very detailed decorations. And these are painted on, and as you can see, this would be for the innermost court, the officials who are closest to the king. As you leave the throne, you can go left or right. I suggest taking left and going into the garden area around Gyeongbokgung. This is called the Royal Banquet Hall, or the Floating Pavilion. As you can see, it's floating on the water. And this is a really good spot to take pictures and to see the lake. And this is where a lot of the typical royal banquets would take place. And it's sort of standing for heaven, the lake with the mountain, you have the pavilion and the island, and it's supposed to be sort of standing for heaven, and how the king is, the heavens and the earth, and it's a lot of symbols. Once you're done with that, I would suggest wandering around through the buildings. As you wander around, you will eventually enter into the inner court, or the Nanjeon. This is where the king's quarters, which are called Gyeongbokgung, are located. The queen's quarters, which are Gyeotajeon, and the queen dowager, so the king's mother, which are called Jaeyeongjong. And as you can see on the outside, they're very simple, but if you look on the inside, they're very, very decorated. They're also different sizes. And this will be a chance to check out and get some more cool pictures as you're wandering around through, either wearing a hanbok or just in day-to-day wear. Either one is really cool to get pictures with. More wandering around will bring you, if you want to make the trip out, there's the Palace of the Crown Prince, which is right now in the upper left and seems the farthest away from everybody. You pass through a very nice green space, and it's very quiet over there because it is so far from everybody. So it's a really good chance to take some more pictures, but also to check out, what it looked like and what it would have been. So the Crown Prince's palace is called Dongguk, and and Dongguk is the Joseong-dong, which is where the crown prince and princess would live. It's their quarters. And the Byonggak, which is the study for the crown prince, so where he would go to study as he was learning how to become a proper ruler and how to best serve the people. As you wander back towards the main palace, you'll come across what looks like a pavilion on water. It's with lots of like lotus pads around it. It's called Gyeongbokgung, and nearby is Gyeongbokgung, which is a private royal library. These are really nice places, again, to take pictures. In the summer, they're really pretty, and sometimes they'll have the private library open with books where you can go in and read the books, or maybe, if you're lucky, maybe even have a cafe, but that just depends. When I was last there, they were doing work on the Lotus Pavilion, and doing restoration work on the pond and the bridge. So you could look and see in. They had plexiglass openings where you could look at, but you couldn't get really close. So I would check to see, as I said, what construction is going on at the time, just so you can be aware. And so, you know, if you get your hopes up about seeing something, you're not disappointed when you find out that it's not available to see or their area is closed for construction. So that's roughly about the Gyeongbokgung main palace, the palace. On Gyeongbokkung's grounds, they have two museums. One is called the National Palace Museum, and the other one is the National Folk Museum. Now, you can access both of them through Gyeongbokgung, or go around if you don't want to go through Gyeongbokgung. The first one I want to talk about is called the National Palace Museum. It's located near the main entrance. It's a history of the palaces, and it has artifacts and relics dating back to the Joseon period. So you'll see all sorts of cool things, like the map. You'll see a picture depicting what the palace would have looked like. You'll see the traditional wear that the prince would wear, or the princess or the king, and foods. And it's a really good place to go if you want to look at the traditional, what to expect in the Joseon period palace. The other is called the National Folk Museum. It looks like it's got a pagoda on top of it. This was used it's used to display traditional artifacts. So basically what would be traditional for the folk people living in the villages. So it has more of the average day-to-day stuff. You can see there's bedding. You can hear about the life of an average person. So that's really good for going to see that if that's what you want to do. Both museums are free. You just have to be aware of your backpack size. So what are my impressions? I think it's a really good place to visit, and if you have time, it's a really cool idea to visit both museums. If you don't have time, it depends on what you're interested in. If you want to learn more about the palaces, I would go to the Palace Museum. If you want to learn more about the day-to-day people and see what artifacts are left from that, really cool to go to the Folk Museum. I really enjoyed wandering around the palace. I went during different seasons. I went during summer when I had first arrived in South Korea, and it was really nice and green and everything was open. At that time, their construction work was working on the kitchens, so it was different. And I really enjoyed walking around and just sort of more of a relaxed thing. I didn't wear a hanbok for that visit, so I didn't have to worry about, the rental or anything. The second time I visited, I was doing the hanbok pictures, which was really fun. And it's a lot of fun to do with your friends or family or whoever you're traveling with. The third time I visited, I went with a friend and we did the Korean tea ceremony in the traditional style, as you can see here. And we got snacks and tea, and it was in, I'd say, March, April, so it was a little bit on the cooler side, temperature-wise. But getting the tea was really nice, and sitting in inside these traditional style houses and being inside and not just. It was really cool to be able to go inside the buildings. And the last time I visited, I went with my family, and they visited my family visited one time during the winter and the other time during the summer. So they visited during the winter, and it was really cool to see, you know, that they had finished the kitchen building. But it was really sad that they had started work on the pavilion, the Lotus Pavilion. So again, it's different things. But it was still really cool to visit and walk around and see everything. So thanks for learning about Gyeongbokgung. I hope it answered any questions you had. If you have any more, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye!